Started. So today we're here to talk about the checklist for your AI content. The prize here, of course, that we're all shooting for is what do we do about AI search? How do we get more sales? How do we get more leads? How do we help our clients if we're agency side? And the prizes are big, right? If you get it right, we have clients making literal millions and millions and millions of dollars from the content that we're generating for them. We have a B2B super niche tech client, one of my favorite stories. They're now generating 91% of all of their software demos from ChatGPT, right? Now, the other thing is this is changing very quickly. So at FOMO, we're a technology company. We built one of the first AI marketing teams. Interestingly, for most of our clients, we work fully managed. So that means we will do the work for them using our platform. We also provide a white label version of this for agencies and fractional CMOs, etc. And that's been very effective. And we're getting to do this on behalf of clients at some pretty surprising agencies, both independent and holding company. And then in about 2 weeks, we're going to launch our full guided self-serve. So we will teach you what we have learned about how to make this win for different types of clients, and also give you access to the same underlying technology that we use. QR code is there. Also, Dax at FOMO.ai. You can reach out to me for questions. You can also schedule a time on the website. Always happy to chat and connect and go through your questions with you. Let's jump in. So if you haven't already, on our homepage, you'll see this banner across the top. We published the State of AI Search Report a couple of weeks ago. It's gone down very well. You can download that, though, from there. In a week, maybe two, I'm also going to publish one around building authority and double EAT scoring, which we'll touch on a little bit later. So if you've already downloaded that one, you'll be on the list to receive the next one. Let's be honest about all this AI search stuff. Nobody actually knows, including me. We are all investing a lot of time in trying to figure this out. And what I'm going to share with you today is all of the best practices we know work, right? There is a real reality, though, that this entire thing is changing very quickly. We know Google obviously has completed its shift from search engine to knowledge engine, answering the questions in the AI overviews. That's big, right? Clicks are disappearing for a lot of brands. I talk to a lot of brands where they're as much as 60% down on what's happened to the clicks, particularly informational. Publishers, of course, particularly hurt. But at the same time, there's this potential growing opportunity of, does ChatGPT and Perplexity more than replace that and allow us to win that traffic? It is changing weekly. I think the news stories that are going to break this week are probably that ChatGPT is ditching their own internet scraping and is doing an exclusive partnership with Google. What does that mean, right? Certainly means SEO is not dead, but it is different and content's a big part of it. And let's all be honest, we had it lucky for 15 years. If you wanted to optimize for organic, you optimize for Google. If you wanted to do paid media, you started with AdWords and then maybe you added in Meta. Now everything is different and we're all back to where we were 15 years ago. We've even got browser wars back. If you haven't seen that, we're now getting new browsers from Perplexity, from ChatGPT, etc. Interestingly, on that note, by the way, something I don't think is being talked about enough is those browsers are an amazing way for the LLMs, the large language models like ChatGPT, to be scraping content using your browser, as opposed to them having to go scrape the web. It means it will bypass all of the blocking of the LLMs if you're trying to block them from scraping your content. Something to consider. But everything is different now, and we have to put in more effort, and we have to find the new ways, and we have to show up to things like this and figure out what's happening. The good news is there's a simple 5-step playbook that we can quickly run through. The first step is keywords sort of matter, right? But now this is really all about conversation. For years before ChatGPT, we had the shift to conversational search with Siri and Alexa, etc. That was really cemented with the arrival of ChatGPT. And so therefore, it's less about the keywords and it's far more about the topics and the themes, right? Think about what conversation about what you do you might be in with an individual. The second thing is you have to know who has the attention and authority. And I'm going to show you an interesting example on this later. But it's probably your direct competitors, but more importantly, your indirect competitors. And I'll show you that example. Third is everything now has to be turned into questions. Conversation is questions, right? Weirdly, my major was evolutionary genetics. And as humans, we're pretty primitive. When we talk to these electronic devices, our brain thinks we're having a conversation with a human. We have this desire to anthropomorphize, easy for me to say, almost anything, right? That's why we see faces in toast. Um, Sorry, that was an odd example. Faces in toast, sure, happens all the time. But so we shift into the mode as though we're talking to a human, and then that is a conversation, and conversation is questions. Fourth step is you have to provide content at a lot larger scale now because you've got to answer a lot more questions in a lot more ways. And it's got to be in the format the audience wants. So some things naturally are better in a video form, some in audio form, some written form, etc. Classic how-to stuff, right? Should we stick with the theme? It's YouTube's bread and butter, right? Making myself hungry. And then the fifth is, of course, you've got to drive attention to your content. That's it. That's the playbook, right? And what's nice here, and obviously I'm going to show you the checklist in a second. This isn't the checklist. What's nice here is there's nothing that isn't really just good marketing, right? There's a lot of this that is just, if you're doing this, you're probably doing better marketing than most other people anyway. So let's talk for a minute before we go into the checklist of AI content. What do you write about, right? And this is an interesting one. So Noom, the health company, has been one of our longest standing clients. We've had a lot of success with them. Some of you might know Noom originally as a Weight Watchers competitor. 18 months, 2 years ago, they also added in being an online pharmacy for GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy, and now for HRT, for premenopause and menopause. So obviously, they need topical authority around those two subjects, and so we write content about that. But more importantly, it is who are they competing against, and what are the gaps that they can win the quickest? So I'm sure if you were casually talking to somebody at Noom and you said, oh, who are your competitors? They might say Weight Watchers of old and Hims and Hers being one of the sort of big online pharmacy chains. Actually, for the questions that would lead you to this article of, how are women's side effects with Ozempic different than men, for instance, they're not their competitors at all. The competitors are Healthline, WebMD, Vogue, and of course Reddit, right? The big Reddit problem. Probably won't touch too much about that today, but it's a major topic of conversation for all of this. And so you first have to go find out who those real competitors are. Then you do analysis to look at why they have the authority, being able to answer those questions today. And then you have to do analysis of their content and find the gaps, right? That's the clever sort of war gaming strategy. Who are you really fighting against for the attention? And then where are they weak? Play to where they're weak, right? And so if you have a content strategy based on that, you get a lot faster set of results from content. Now, there is also something to keep in mind, which is your core topic, probably the audience clicking through to you is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's going to be different for you each, depending on what industry you're in. And so there is one other strategy, which is to go find new topics very closely related to your core topics, but are peripheral, right? Maybe they're far more upper funnel, maybe they're sort of a little tangential. You can't go too far away from core topic because you risk Google penalizing you for that. HubSpot, for instance, got trashed for doing things like choosing, how to set up an LLC, for instance, which I thought was harsh. I think a lot of HubSpot users are small businesses and freelancers, so it seemed fairly legit. But you create these additional topics and you start to piece back chunks of your audience. And what you're looking for is topics with very, very high search volume, but at the same time, really, really, really low competition. Don't mistake competition to mean a topic people aren't writing about. We identified one for one of our clients. It has 420 something million active searches every year. They can monetize those people searching for that. Lots of people are making content around that same topic. However, nobody's doing it well. And nobody's structuring it in this way. Nobody's AI search ready in that space. So actually, they will make millions of dollars from doing that project. All right. For those of you who joined late, I'm going to make the slides available. I'm going to make the recording available. So feel free to screenshot, but also know I will be sending it around. We've got a few slides coming up, which is now the sort of crux of this checklist. And a lot of it is lists, right? It's just the easiest way for me to get the content over to you. I'm not going to read through them all. I'll give you a chance to sort of pick up the basics, and then you can look at the slides later as well. Humans have become impatient. AI is even more impatient. Your core web vitals like site speed are absolutely critical. If you haven't yet played with ChatGPT's new agent, go ask it to go buy something on your site or register for, information or anything that's relevant to you. We did it for a client the other day, and it took 23 minutes to try and make a purchase on something that should have been very easy, and it failed. We're going to talk more about optimizing for that potentially later, but just know you have to go figure out how your site is being seen by those, and you have to do all these fundamentals, right? Site speed in particular is very important. Avoid JavaScript dependency. Hopefully lots of you don't have that anymore, but it's really key, and hardly any of your content will be exposed to the LLMs. They have no interest really in going to try and digest your JavaScript. Things like overly complicated site builds, get rid of it. I've had 2 conversations with major brands in the last 24 hours about should they switch to Shopify. It's hard to argue against that right now, and I understand there's a lot of nuance for certain businesses. So make sure you're doing your basics well. I know a lot of people love to say SEO is dead. Some parts of SEO, thankfully, are dead, right? I mean, what have we been doing for 20 years? But a lot of these fundamentals remain the same, and they're just good things to do. The other basic is just write good content, right? Like Google doesn't care if your content is AI. It's openly said multiple times it doesn't care. What it cares about is crap, right? It doesn't want you putting out content, whether it's written by a human or written by AI, that is terrible, terrible content, right? And a lot of human content is terrible content. That is probably worse than good AI content. The content discoverability piece is really important because it won't be humans soon that are coming to your site. We all already have 2 versions of our site, right? We have the front-facing site, and then we have the site map for Google indexing. We also used to have mobile-specific sites, right? Remember that? We now need to recognize that by the end of next year, about a third of all web traffic will be your personal AI agent doing stuff for you. That's huge. And so you have to make sure it's accessible, but you also have to make sure you have content indexed so that those agents come and give you any attention whatsoever. And a quick reminder as I go through this, because some of you came in just now, the chat is open. Feel free to ask questions as I go through. Second point, get fresh. Conversation, right? Think about conversations you're in life. It's just human to human. The conversations probably that are the most engaging and the most interesting are the ones where you're talking about the more recent things or recent opinions on things that went before. Good conversation tends to be fresh and up to date. The headline here is write content frequently and make sure you are seen as an up-to-date, recent publisher of good content on the topics you care about. This screenshot happens to be a bit of a sneaky trick that you can do. So some of you will know people like Vogue, GQ, etc. They used to monetize through ads, and now that's a shit show in the industry. Let's face it, sort of programmatic ads right now. And so a lot of the way they're monetizing is through affiliate, right? They're making a lot of money off affiliate. So this is a great example. By the way, I didn't know there was a beauty advent calendar, never mind 41 best of them. When they first published this, it was like three best beauty advent calendars. And then a few days later, it was seven, right? And they just kept going up. And the reason why is it allowed them to keep changing the refresh date on the article. So it was fresher and fresher and fresher and fresher. But you can't just change your publication date. The content, when it gets indexed, hashed, for those of you who are more in the sort of weeds of that side of it, when it comes up with your sort of hash score for your content, it has to see what Google call is a substantial change. And so going from 1 to 2 to 3, probably not substantial. Going from 3 to 7 to 14, whatever, great. Nice sneaky little trick to keep your listicles having value. Knowledge gain is often forgotten about or lost or just not talked about enough. Knowledge gain is really important. The LLMs, they've already indexed everything on the web, right? They've also indexed a lot of stuff that wasn't on the open web as well, which is interesting. They crave new stuff, right? They know if you talk to them and you're looking for something, you want new stuff. So, of course, they're craving new stuff. And so, if you can produce content that has a knowledge gain, i.e., knowledge that didn't exist to them before, you win. And knowledge gain can come from new data, like do surveys, do reports, do extraction of data from client stuff, whatever it might be. Share new ideas, share new stories from clients from your industry, whatever it might be. Have a unique point of view and be willing to share it is a big one. Um, and then there seems to be this prioritization for content that goes deeper by instead of just telling something, actually teaching something. I'm a little 50-50 on where the format of that particular content's going to end up. But I think we can all agree that if you are in a topic where something really needs explaining, actually putting the time and effort into writing a really good explainer is going to be better than somebody who's just listing out some bullets, right? Get rid of the fluff. Stop trying to pad your content with garbage. We talked about focusing on questions in the 5-step playbook I showed you, right? This is now how you then use those questions. So ideally, your title post is a key question. H2s and H3s within your content should probably be questions if it naturally fits. Think about having one piece of content. I don't know, let's say if it was a FOMO piece of content, how do I rank in AI search? That question is going to ask 1,000 different ways, right? And so you've got to play a delicate game of how do you write enough content that answers that questions in different ways that doesn't just keep coming over as duplicative on your site. And it is a challenge and it requires a proper content strategy, but that's really the game of what you want to do. Now, another point is if you have your H2 and it's a question, answer the question in the first 2 or 3 sentences. It really wants to find these short snippets. It might quote them directly, it might quote them indirectly, but if it's not in those first 2 to 3 sentences, chances are it's not going to do as well. You can have a longer answer below it, but make sure you're succinct and you've got a quick answer to the question below the question. A couple of other good points for you there. One of the things that we do actually, thinking about it for questions and for the knowledge gain piece, is we as an organization, we have clients in all sorts of niches. And so we would do what would be a fairly obvious thing to you probably, which is set up a Zoom call with a client, ask them questions, collect information, use that in the content, right? It's not scalable for me. And it oftentimes those people have jobs, right? They've got other things to be doing. They don't necessarily want to go have to talk to this group they don't really know about things for an hour every month. We built an AI interviewer, and people love that because it's fun and it's new. And you just get a link, you click on it, and a human voice gives you an interview for 5 to 15 minutes. You could recreate this manually if you wanted to, but that's a great way to extract new stuff and also to understand what the questions are that people are asking. And here's a good example of us sort of squeezing in questions in what I think is a natural way. We put together an AI search advisory board. It's our job to be better and know about AI search more than anybody else in the world. That's our goal. That's our job. So we have an AI search advisory board, and Jess Schultz, who's one of the leading SEO futurists, is on that advisory board. And this is a press release we put out. So look at what we put in the press release, right? Schultz will help FOMO's clients cut through the hype and address 3 of the highest volume queries flooding search bars, right? And then look, we naturally got to put in 3 questions into the press release, and that is now spread out all over the world. I think press releases are an enormous missed opportunity. Google doesn't really care about no follow anymore. Not in the way it used to anyway. Find natural ways to insert questions into your content smartly. Quick bonus. Really good friend of mine was the CMO at Citigroup, and SVP American Express, etc. And she taught me years ago how to interview customers to really get to the bottom of what it is they want and what they think about your product. I often think of her examples now as a great way to really find what you need for AI search. So one of the things she would do is she would go into somebody's home and she would talk to them about the credit card that they were going to launch. And after doing most of the conversation, she would say, now that you know what this is, how would you describe it to a colleague, right? Or a friend or a loved one? What they say next is critical. That's your copywriting, right? The way your customers speak is how you should probably speak. Some exceptions, of course. So that in itself is gold. But now, when I talk to people, I have a follow-up where I say, "What questions do you think they would ask you?" That is a great way to get to the heart of the questions of what your audience is really asking beyond all the data analysis. We have to have authority and transparency. If you are in a YMYL category, what's that? That is your money or your life, right? That is categories that Google says you cannot be wrong. The consequences are too big. So it is medical, financial, legal, and now every e-commerce store. For you in YMYL, you cannot not have authors associated to your content. You just can't. It's a black and white thing. You're going to get trashed in volume, in traffic, if you don't fix that, if you don't have it. Outside of YMYL, it's a great idea to do it because it's going to help, right? But YMYL, it's just black and white. And this is a great example from Noom. We have reviewed by, it's in schema markup, structured on the site in the right way, and links to a really good author bio page that lists the content she's written and has external links. I've mentioned a few times this idea of double eat. I know some of you on the call have been to previous sessions on that, so I'm not going to labor this point, but I'm just going to spend a moment or two on it in relation to authority and transparency. It stands for experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And Google uses this as a metric actually a lot with human manual scoring for their twiddlers of changing what their results are. To evaluate, is that brand, is that person associated with that brand, do they tick these boxes and therefore their content can be trusted? Because we have to remember, Google, we all used to think of as a search engine. Now it's a knowledge engine. It's answering those questions. Like it or not, people are going to assume the answers they got are coming from Google, and therefore Google's on the hook to be right. So they have to be damn sure. And this is essentially how they do the scoring and the level of impact of each of these things. If we get time later and some of you stay on after the half hour or so, we might come back to that and dive into it. Chunking. Chunking's an interesting one. People don't read a full article if it's served to them by Gemini and ChatGPT, right? They're not interested in replicating your 2,000-word piece. They're looking for sections that they can bring out, and that's essentially what trunking is. There's a little bit of technical setup to it, but not really a lot. A lot of it, again, is just being a good marketer and writing content in a good way. So clear headers, no brainer, right? Keep your paragraph short. Remember that thing I told you earlier about answer every question in the first couple of sentences. That's going to help you. 7 of 9 is create content hubs, right? Again, great marketing. There's nothing particularly new here that seems shocking, but it is all so much more important to do in the right way now. And so in this world, what we care about is, if you remember, I said we care less about keywords. You need to care about what's the topic in the conversation. So now, because we care about topics, we have to have content hubs related to the topics you want to be a topical authority in, right? Sort of a no-brainer. How can you be a topical authority on something you don't have a set of content around, structured in the right way to help people understand your topic? Um, I won't read through these, but you get the idea. This is an old school SEO technique that used to have sort of vague value. Now it has absolute concrete, crystal clear value. This one's funny. I catch myself doing this. There's lots of studies about how our brains are changing because of ChatGPT. One is people are starting to sound like AI. And you have to avoid yourself or your writers falling into this trap, right? I mean, all of these we look at and we roll our eyes and go, oh, yeah, yeah. But look at the bottom one. In conclusion, right? In conclusion was a perfectly legitimate thing to say in content until not that long ago. Now, I'm sorry, you got to avoid it, right? If you don't want to sound like AI. My biggest hate, it's not this, it's that. Oh my God. I'll be amazed if ChatGPT 5 still writes that way. Claude, Sonnet 4, Opus 4, brilliant. It really avoids a lot of this. And out of interest, before we go on to the ninth one, the way we built our platform to generate human quality content that's legally accurate, medically accurate, financially accurate, on brand, blah, 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 is we had to mimic human behavior. And so when you put in a keyword or a long tail keyword like a question, there's a researcher, a writer, a editor, a QA, an SEO manager, a brand strategist, a social media manager, and a graphic designer. None of those are human. They have to have a conversation and collaborate to first figure out the best set of titles versus for SEO and readability, and then they go off and they write the content using all of the best practices. And out of interest, we actually write every article behind the scenes 3 times in a committee, review all 3 of those articles, and then choose which is the best, and then go through the polishing process. It's really cool, but it also avoids anything sounding like AI content. This one's more challenging. You now have to do some tech stuff that you didn't have to do before. Um, the couple of sites I mentioned at the beginning of this call that are contemplating should they just move to Shopify now is in part because of this, because they've got custom built websites and it's going to be an absolute nightmare for them to try and adjust this. Places like Shopify are technically maybe already set up for a lot of this stuff, and therefore it will be a big win with them making the shift. In the authority report I mentioned at the beginning that we're going to put out in a couple of weeks, we will include a whole thing about schema and structured data. That's your 9 checklist, right? And I've hit the 30 minutes. Great. I'm going to keep going. You're very welcome to stay. I'm going to show you more useful things now, and I'm here to answer questions. But I appreciate some of you might have only committed 30 minutes to this. So moving on to some extra stuff, multi-format, different types of content is seeming like it really matters. One of our favorite clients, PB 5-star, newish brand 2+ years ago. They make pickleball apparel, shoes, etc. If you haven't seen PB 5-star and you play pickleball, it's worth looking at. They've been experimenting where with their Shopify store, they're using the turn on the audio option, right? That's quite interesting. We are seeing some data. I don't know if I'm quite fully bought into it yet, but there's more and more data seemingly coming out that says 2 formats of content on the same page will do better, right? There's content that in old school Google is ranking way down in position 30 that is now the #1 cited source in AI overviews if it also has a video version of the content on the same page. Google's trying to prioritize the understanding that humans want different things in different ways, and therefore, how can they reward that? So that's interesting. It also doesn't have to be that hard. FOMO.ai has a AI podcast, right? It's mostly fun, and we're an AI company, so we can certainly get away with it. But we built a process that takes articles that we publish on our blog and turns them into the conversation. Some of you will have tried Google's tool that helps you do this. And then we publish it as a podcast. And as you can see, I mean, it does great on downloads. I think we've only published 11 episodes so far. And if you're really interested in sort of the future of AI, I'll put the link in the chat. I publish one about the future of AI as though it's 2035 and I'm writing the history from 2025. I only bring it up because that publishes as an AI podcast, very relevant, of course, to being AI. We only published 3 episodes and we got an alert saying we were 19th in the world that day for science fiction podcasts. Right, that's intriguing. None of this stuff has to be particularly hard as long as you can find a way to do this kind of creative stuff so it fits your brand. Quick checklist based on quick myth busting, I should say, based on things we're often asked or often hear. Google doesn't like AI content. Actually, that's not true. Google is very happy with AI content. Just remember what I said. It doesn't want crap content, whether it's human or AI. Secondly, right at the beginning of ChatGPT, people started bragging like this of we created 10,000 pieces of content and we got all this great results. All of these sites are de-indexed by Google now. That is not the play. Your content has to be a higher volume for sure. For a lot of our clients, we're publishing 90 pieces in the first 90 days. And then often 10 to 30 on a monthly basis. And that's kind of about what you need to do. And with our upcoming new guided self-serve version that you can email me about, we'll teach you how to do that. But you can't do this nonsense of publish 10,000 articles and plan to get away with that. We talked about the Vogue example. That works great. Now, we often get asked, well, we don't have any authors. We don't have any experts, right, that are willing to go onto the site. So can we create fake authors? The jury's out on this one. The Sports Illustrated example is the one that is always given, but the Sports Illustrated example has a very, very specific nuance to it. And that is that, first of all, they're in the business of writing content, and they're in the business of writing content supposedly by human experts. That's why people go to Sports Illustrated. They tried to pretend that their authors were human, right? And that's like when chatbots came out 10 years ago. Lots of sites initially tried to pass it off as human. They were awful. And so we sort of got into this habit of the chatbot's not human, but it can connect you to a human if it can't help you. And that became an acceptable trade. So I think fake authors, if you're trying to pass them off as human, not good. However, I think AI authors, where there is a logical reason why it should be an AI author rather than a human author, fair game, go for it. An example of that would be, there's a lot happening with this administration around the changes to the Department of Education. We do a lot of work in the education sector. You could imagine an AI author legitimately being received well if it is generating content at volume, right? Like 10 updates a day based on what's happening with the Department of Education. That's fair use case. That's fair game. Alrighty. That is all I was going to run through with you today. I don't see questions in the chat. If anybody has one, feel free to throw it in there now. I'm going to stay on for as long as people stay connected. I will send out the recording when it's ready. And we have a new Substack. I don't know what it is. Email me, dax@FOMO.ai, and I'll give you access to the new Substack, where we are putting all of our latest and greatest sort of AI search stuff and the updates from our experts there. So you'll be some of the first people to be able to access that. We'll probably start publishing there over the next week or two. We've got a backlog of our AI search advisory board people there. Alrighty, hopefully that was useful. If you're an agency and you need us to do this for your clients, feel free to reach out, schedule a call. If you are a brand and you want us to do this, we provide the done for you service. We've got clients paying $3.5K a month to $75K a month. So we can cover the full spectrum really of those clients. And in addition, we'll have our new guided self-serve coming out in a few weeks, which is all of the same platform my team uses to work on these brands, plus though all of this guiding step by step on exactly what you should be doing.